A lot of people have been talking about why the Democratic Party lost, and some people blame progressivism. Some people say the party's too moderate, but I don't think that progressivism is necessarily the problem, but the type of progressivism that the Democratic Party uses is a problem because it's seen as anti-business. It's seen as bad for the economy. We often hear members of the Democratic Party paint economic issues in terms of the working class versus the business class. Things like $15 an hour minimum wage, worker benefits, universal health care. Progressivism is seen as essentially an anti-business ideology, and in the United States, it mostly is an ideology that's focused on the working class and is fairly hostile towards business class. We often see progressives blaming greed for issues such as homelessness, inflation, really all of the problems in our society. But those types of issues have existed before capitalism. Things like homelessness, healthcare, these are all issues that have existed for a really long time in human society. I consider myself to be a pro-business progressive. I think we can implement policies like $15 an hour minimum wage or maybe even higher without harming small businesses, as well as policies like universal healthcare. We can implement it in a market-oriented solution. But in the United States, progressivism and pro-business policy are often seen as antithetical. An example of what I'd call a pro-business progressive policy would be if we had a $15 an hour minimum wage, but for small businesses, they just paid $13 an hour and then the government covered the other $2 an hour. That would help small businesses that can't necessarily afford $15 an hour, but at the same time, it would ensure that everyone gets paid at least $15 an hour. And I think for universal healthcare, we could adopt a more market-oriented solution where healthcare companies that receive a percentage of the income of the individual policyholder rather than a fixed amount. We could also have consumer unions for healthcare, where consumers joined a union where they could collectively bargain with healthcare companies. And by requiring it to have, like for instance, 15% of the income for a certain policy, that would ensure that low-income people, it keeps the percentage of their income that they're spending on healthcare low, even if they don't have a lot of money. It would also create a progressive pricing structure where higher income people pay more and lower income pay less. And if you had $0 in income, then you would pay 15% of zero, which is zero. So it would effectively guarantee healthcare for everyone. Another example I can think of a pro-business progressive policy, we could offer tax incentives for companies that adopt a 4-day work week. That way it's not being forced on anyone. So businesses that can't really work with a 4-day work week wouldn't do it, but businesses that could work with it would get a tax incentive to do so. And I think the idea of pro-business progressivism can really be applied to the entire Democratic Party platform. Any progressive policy, instead of looking at it through the lens of the working class versus the business class, can see it as broader societal issues that need to work together with businesses and working class people to solve these issues. An example of someone I would call a pro-business progressive, there aren't a lot. The only one I can think of is maybe Andrew Yang, but I don't really support universal basic income. We see that progressive economic policies are very popular, but the implementation of them is not really popular because the implementation of them is often harmful to small businesses. But if we worked on the implementation and instead of just saying, if you can't afford $15 an hour, then you shouldn't be in business, we can try to help out small businesses with that. And I think the idea of moderate versus progressive is an oversimplified explanation. It's as if policies are kind of like on a spectrum from moderate to progressive, but that's not really how things work. And I think if we had a candidate that wanted to implement progressive policy, but did it in a pro-business way, that would be very popular. There's no reason for progressivism to be anti-business or have this ideology of the working class versus the business class. Anyway, I think that's about all.